Hello there and welcome. This is Mikhail or Michael speaking, and as always, before the video starts, I want to say thank you all who decided to support me financially, be it through Patreon, PayPal, or Super Thanks. Your financial support is very important for me and this channel, so thank you again. Now, today's video I will start with the Avdiivka city, where the Russian offensive continues without stop. In the last 24 hours, Russian forces continued their offensive operations in the general direction of Tonenke and Severne. These attacks came from the settlement of Vadiane. Russian forces also assaulted Ukrainian positions on the open fields in between Avdiivka and Opitne, attacked along T0505 road and in the general direction of Avdiivka city from the settlement of Spartak. There are also reported Russian attacks from the settlement of Kamyanka and even Vesele. Russians also attacked from Krasnogorovka in the general direction of Stepove and Berdichi and continued fighting for the control over this artificial mountain. Ukrainians answered these Russian attacks with the counterattacks of their own, counterattacking near Stepove and Berdichi, as well as near coke plant and generally all across the front line. At some places they were successful in stopping Russians, at some places they were not. Let's discuss this in more detail. First, let's talk about the northern flank of Avdiivka and discuss the situation here. The key settlement for the Russian offensive here in this area is the settlement of Krasnogorovka. It is absolutely essential for the future Russian offensives in the general direction of Ukrainian-controlled Novomykhailivka and coke plant with these villages. All throughout last 24 hours, Russian forces conducted offensive operations all around this settlement, with the hottest fighting happening here in this area, where both Ukrainians and Russians are yet again battling out for the control over this specific mountain. Here on the video you can see an example of one of these attacks as Russian tanks are slowly advancing in the direction of those said Ukrainian positions, constantly firing in an attempt to suppress Ukrainian forces. In my last video, I reported that Russians were forced to retreat from this artificial mountain, and it is now confirmed by Syriac maps. As to whether Ukrainians are now in control of it or it is in the gray zone is unclear, but once again, heavy battles on it and around it are still happening as I record this video. After suppressing Ukrainian positions, Russian tanks return to the main column, which then proceeds to attack. However, I was unable to receive the video of this attack, so it's unclear whether it was successful or not. Russian forces also continued their assault in the direction of Stepova and Berdichi. Most pro-Russian sources are claiming a very successful offensive here in this area, as Russians are able to not only cross the rail line, but also capture a train station, which will then allow them to enter the settlement of Stepova and initiate the battle for it. I'm sure as the time goes by, we will receive more confirmations on this particular portion of the front, and if that is to happen, I will make sure to report on it in my next video. Then, when it comes to the Russian attacks in the general direction of Novomykhailivka village, as a result of successful offensive operations, Russian forces were able to successfully advance and capture more territories that are adjacent to this rail line. Here's exactly how much territory Russians were able to recover in that attack. Now, whether this is a sign that Russians will be advancing in the direction of Novomykhailivka or just simply expanding their zone of control around Krasnogorovka is unclear. Again, time will tell. But generally speaking, the more territories Russians control around Krasnogorovka, the better it is for the Russians. It will give them all the necessary space for a more mass assaults against Ukrainian positions here in this area. Now, when it comes to the Russian attacks directly against Avdiivka, the situation remains to be difficult, as Russians are forced to fight in uphill battle. Currently, Russians are fighting along these roads in attempt to capture this entire net of Ukrainian trenches and enter Avdiivka city itself. As a result of offensive operations in the last 24 hours, Russian forces were able to advance ever slightly here in this area and capture this small intersection with a portion of trenches. As I speak, the battle is currently ongoing, and it is still premature to call on its results. Then from here, let's quickly visit the Marinka settlement and discuss the situation here, not only within Marinka, but also within Novomykhailivka. When it comes to Marinka, there are not much territorial changes as Russians continued their offensive operations within the city itself, as well as in the direction of Ukrainian-controlled village of Pobeda, and also to the north of Marinka, in the general direction of Georgievka, and in attempt to outflank Ukrainian forces within Marinka itself. On the video that you are about to see, you can see Russian forces bombarding the remains of Ukrainian forces that took refuge in a stronghold located near the warehouses at the very outskirts of Marinka. As you can see, slowly but surely, Ukrainian forces are pushed out into the open fields, which makes them vulnerable to Russian artillery. With its support, Russians continue to make occasional small gains, thus advancing in the process. When it comes to the settlement of Novomykhailivka, the situation had significantly changed. If you remember, about a week ago, Russians launched a massive offensive in the direction of this settlement, and with the support of artillery had made some initial territorial gains. And it is come to my attention that in the last 24 hours, Russians were able to significantly advance here in this area. And here on this picture, you can see exactly how much territories Russians were able to recover in that attack. As you can see, Russians are getting closer and closer to the Novomykhailivka settlement. If we zoom in, we can see that it is pretty big, and if Ukrainians are to stand their ground here, the battle for it would be very hard and bloody. After Novomykhailivka, Russians will be going for Konstantinivka, which is used by the Ukrainians as a supply hub. It is safe to assume that Novomykhailivka is a secondary goal of this Russian offensive, with Kostinivka the main one. Again, if you have something to object or anything to add to what I said, please use comment section to express your opinions. From here, let's move to the Avdiivka tactical bridgehead and quickly discuss the situation here. There are some reports coming in from mostly pro-Russian side, which claims that Russian forces continued their offensive operations from the settlement of Priutne and are currently advancing in the general direction of settlements of Novodarivka and Rivnopol. As to how truthful those claims are is not for me to decide. From Avdiivka tactical bridgehead, let's move to the Rabotina-Orekhiv sector. Since my last upload, the situation here haven't changed much, as Ukrainians continued their unsuccessful attempts at reaching Novoprokopivka as well as Verbova and Novopokrovka. Again, generally speaking, the intensity of Ukrainian assaults are dying down very dramatically. At this time, Ukrainians are mostly attacking with small groups of infantry, and it shouldn't really come as a surprise that Ukrainians were unsuccessful when it comes to the attacks in the direction of Novoprokopivka, Verbova, and Novopokrovka. On an interesting note, there were reports of a successful Russian counterattack from Verbova, in which Russians successfully attacked along this road and the force line within it, and clear a portion of a trench that is located along this road. Now, this attack was caught on camera, and I am willing to show it. However, due to the YouTube's restrictions, I am unable to do so fully. If you want to see the full video of that attack, you can find it on my Telegram channel. And if you want to see my videos uncensored, you can always consider joining my Patreon. Not only you will be able to help me financially, but also fight censorship on YouTube. Again, I thank you in advance, and let's continue to the video itself. On the video, you can see several Russian infantry fighting vehicles advancing in the direction of Ukrainian positions that are hidden along this road and are coming under fire by the Ukrainian artillery, and in the distance you can also see Russian shells exploding, thus providing covering fire for advancing Russians. Of course, as you can see, some of those shells are hitting very close to the Russian infantry fighting vehicle as they themselves are firing upon Ukrainians in attempt to suppress them and land their infantry safely. After some time, they are able to do so, and after landing out their troops, they are withdrawing back to the Russian defensive lines. Here in this video, you can see Russians advancing towards Ukrainian trenches in attempt to clear them. It seems that the Russian artillery had already done a number on the Ukrainian forces and the trenches, and what was supposed to be a storming operation turned out into a clearing operation. Some Ukrainian forces within the trenches, of course, tried to give a fair fight to the Russians, but were outnumbered and outgunned. Then Russians proceeded to clear the remaining portions of the trench, capturing several Ukrainian troops in the process. So here for you, I've provided a clear evidence of a successful Russian offensive here in this area. So it is safe to say that perhaps this entire area is now in the full control of Russians. In any way, this is all that I have for you today. Hopefully this video was to your liking and was informative enough. As always, if you have something to add, comment section is there for a reason. If you want to support this channel, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing if you haven't done so. I would really appreciate it. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a good day and always remember, Russia will be free and great.